100% of patients at Willowbrook contract hepatitis within 6 months of being in the institution. Most patients at some time in their life have parasites. The incidence of pneumonias is greater than any other group of people that I think exist in this country.
Who's in charge here, Jerry? This is Mrs. Nixon. I'm Congressman Biaggi. How are you? Why are these patients unclothed?
We don't have enough clothing. We don't have the proper help to keep clothing on them. We have a few nudists that will not keep clothes on. They will pull them off. But most of all, we don't have the help to keep the kids properly dressed.
You're talking about more money for the institution.
Well, that we could use, because then we will have more help.
Children, lying on the floor naked and smeared with their own feces, they were making a pitiful sound, a kind of mournful wail that it's impossible for me to forget.
The history of Willowbrook is even more horrifying than what has been uncovered already, and has been successfully hidden from the public's eye until now. The connections between Willowbrook, the U.S. Army, Bellevue, Seaview Hospital, and American Pediatrics are not covered anywhere else to date. Get ready for the most in-depth exploration of America's medical and psychological research that has not only created a dark history, but has paved the path for all clinical research, medications, and theories that have been created throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Willowbrook was originally built by the state of New York to house mentally retarded and developmentally disabled children. However, in 1938, plans quickly changed due to World War II, and the building would be used for the next 10 years by the United States Army. The building was the home of the U.S. Army's Halloran Hospital and the prisoner of war camp from 1938 to 1951.
Rolling into one of the nation's many rehabilitation centers, a deluxe hospital train brings home some of our first wounded from overseas. At Halloran, largest military hospital in the United States, doctors and nurses specially trained to cope with the problems of these veterans are doing a magnificent job. And here's where
But that didn't stop the state of New York from using the building for its intended purpose, as they would open Willowbrook's doors for the developmentally disabled children in 1947, 4 years before Halloran would close for good. Halloran Hospital and Willowbrook State School were operating during the same time, the same building, researching the same diseases. During World War II, the world was dealing with a global outbreak of hepatitis, and American soldiers were given the yellow fever vaccination to help stop this spread. Yet, it was finally discovered that these vaccinations were in fact spreading hepatitis, not fighting against it, and infected over 330,000 soldiers in one hospital. When Willowbrook opened its doors, the medical director, Dr. Sal Krugman, began researching hepatitis due to the overwhelming number of infections at Willowbrook State School. A research study that would go on from 1956 to 1971. Could it be possible that these children were infected with hepatitis by cohabitating in the same building as the Army veterans who were being treated for the disease? Regardless, Dr. Krugman carried out his research with over 700 reported patients between the ages of 3 to 10 years old. Dr. Krugman reportedly told parents that the only way to gain admittance into the institution was to consent to his research. His unethical research included taking feces from the infected children and turning it into a serum that would be fed to the uninfected children, successfully infecting the 6,000 plus children that were patients in the institute.
100% of patients at Willowbrook contract hepatitis within 6 months of being in the institution. Most patients at some time in their life have parasites. The incidence of pneumonias and is greater than any other group of people that I think exist in this country.
Dr. Barrett Bloomberg was a colleague of Dr. Krugman's, studying hepatitis alongside him, pioneering the first hepatitis B vaccine. Dr. Bloomberg would release the first ever vaccine against hepatitis B in the early 70s, with the help of the major pharmaceutical company Merck & Co. The same year that Dr. Krugman was elected as the president of American Pediatrics. Yes, the same doctor that abused thousands of children. Krugman took the fall for the faulty studies, yet Bloomberg continued his research, winning the Nobel Prize in 1976, with both men appearing to have been rewarded for their efforts. The hepatitis studies were revealed to the world, however, along with the abuse and neglect that children at the institute were enduring. Geraldo Rivera released an expose with haunting footage in 1972, revealing the abuse, neglect, and horrors the children were forced to endure. This expose came 7 years after Attorney General Robert Kennedy went on air to condemn the institution and incite state action for legal and medical reform.
Well, I visited the state institutions for the mentally retarded, and I think particularly at Willowbrook that we have a situation that borders on a snake pit, and that the children live in filth, that many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower. There's very little future for the children or for those who are in these institutions. Both need a tremendous overhauling. I'm not saying that those who are the attendants there or the ones that run the institution are at fault. I think all of us are at fault. And I think it's just it's long overdue that something be done about it.
Geraldo Rivera was able to gain access and insight into Willowbrook through a quote-unquote stolen key given to him by a doctor previously staffed at Willowbrook.
2 days after our first unofficial visit, a camera crew was given an authorized tour of the facility. While unannounced, we'd found the children naked and basically unattended. They were shown kids who were fully clothed and generously attended. It was to ensure that this sudden improvement in the quality of life was permanent that we returned without the knowledge of the school administration and through a back door. It was the first day all over again.
For these people, life is just 1 hour after another of looking at the floor, and there's no training going on here. Can the children be trained? Yes, every child can be trained. You know, these kids, there's no effort. We don't know what these kids are capable of doing. Some training programs go on at Willowbrook, but the state provides a bare minimum, just enough so that they can call this place a school. The state, clearly these kids aren't getting any training. I mean, I don't think I even have to say that. They're just sitting here on the ward. These are the hours during which they should be in school, and they're not.
What ward is this now?
This is building 27. These patients do have clothes on today. But as you can see, the one thing that can't be hidden is that there are no training programs. That all these patients do is sit during the day. They're not kept occupied. Their life is just hours and hours of endless nothing to do, no one to talk to, no expectations, just an endless life of misery and filth. What you see, it makes you think that it's hopeless that they can't be trained, but you know, they only look this way because they haven't ever had opportunity for training. You know, if you or I were left to sit on a ward surrounded by other mentally retarded people, we would probably begin looking like this too.
The Willowbrook State School is this country's largest home for the mentally retarded. It's called a school, but that's more a statement of aspiration than of fact. Fewer than 20% of the 5,230 people who are kept here attend any kind of classes.
The doctor had reportedly been fired for attempting to help parents tend to and check in on their children. After his dismissal, he took it upon himself to rally parents and file a lawsuit against Willowbrook that would take several years until settling in court. The lawsuit cited the following issues: confining residents for indefinite periods of time, failing to release residents eligible for release, failing to conduct periodic evaluations of residents to assess progress and refine goals and programming, failing to provide habilitation for residents, not providing adequate educational programs or services such as speech, occupational, or physical therapy, overcrowding, lack of privacy, failure to provide protection from theft of personal property, assault, or injury, inadequate clothing, meals, and facilities, including toilet facilities, confining residents to beds, chairs, or to solitude, lack of compensation for work performed, inadequate medical facilities, and understaffing and incompetence in the professional staff. This lawsuit, along with many others that were filed over the years, wouldn't get this terrible institution shut down. Even when the law started to change, Willowbrook's residents only grew. The Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act and the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act were enforced in 1975, and the Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act came out in 1980 due to the expose released by Geraldo Rivera, along with many other institutions coming to light with the same horrors. Willowbrook State Institution wouldn't be closed until 1987. I really wish that were the worst of it, and I wish I could explain this next part better. But honestly, I am still lost, and I will take any information from the viewers. If you guys know anything, please come forward. What originally was going to be a video of a horrible institution ended up turning into a rabbit hole that I couldn't fit into one video. Frankly, because I haven't found all the missing pieces to the puzzle. Willowbrook is notorious for its abuse and illegal research. However, through all of my research, the words chemical restraints come up quite a bit in major news sources. Yet antipsychotics weren't released until 1952 by researcher Nathan S. Klein, a psychiatrist at Rockland State University in New York. Dr. Klein was also the first researcher to begin using reserpine as a tranquilizer, which quickly became the most popular chemical restraint across the US. When researching Dr. Klein's studies, however, the little bit of information that is available shows it is likely all of it was highly unethical. There are reports online that he was tasked by the state of New York to investigate the mortality rate at Willowbrook, thus conducting studies on the first antipsychotic, the promazine, which was also used for chemical restraints. It should be noted here that when the drugs were used, very little research had been done to prove that they were even effective. Therefore, when patients were injected with these drugs, they were likely irate and aggressive, so the person injecting them couldn't be gentle. Nor could they chance not giving the patients enough to calm them down in one injection. There are reports that chemical restraints were responsible for a lot, if not most, of the deaths within the state-run institution.
The drugs do not create dependences. Dr. Sputnitz is using it in a somewhat different sense, as I'm sure he'll agree, that as compared with heroin or amphetamines, we're not talking about that. The drugs which are used in treatment do not produce addiction or drug dependence in the usual sense. And I think what Dr. Sputnitz raises as a point is that the individual, should there be a recurrence, would obviously turn to the more rapid treatment. I think what you're trying to get at is to stir up the question of whether Dr. Sputnitz and possibly Dr. Casriel get at the causes of things and therefore obviate the possibility of recurrence, whereas, as has been accused, I stress the relief of symptoms. There was a French surgeon, Paré, who lived in the 16th century, and he made a great statement. He said, "I treat and God cures." And in a sense, no physician ever cured any patient of anything. All that the physician can do is to maximize the possibilities of self-healing. And I think this is what Paré meant, and it's just as true today. Dr. Sputnitz and Dr. Casriel do it in terms of dealing with either psychotherapy, with the mind, or with the emotions. The approach which we we do primarily is in terms of the biochemistry. There are patients whom we also refer for psychotherapists. We have two very good psychologists working with us, so that it's not that we look down or reject this type of treatment. But psychotherapy, we don't know any more really about how psychotherapy works than we know how pharmacotherapy works. The objectives of the psychotherapist is the same objectives as we have, and that is relief of the pain and suffering and increasing the individual's productive participation in what's going on. This area of my approach is the least controversial rather than the most, because the Food and Drug Administration requires that before a new drug is put on the market, that one must compare it either with a placebo, that is a blank, or with a standard drug which is already on the market. So that any kind of therapy which I give is subject to very rigid examination and scientific requirements. In a sense, the psychotherapy, I've often wondered why the Food and Drug Administration doesn't subject psychotherapy to these same criteria and make the therapist demonstrate that what he's doing is superior to doing nothing or is superior to standard treatment.
Although not much is available online about Dr. Klein, I did find this video on Web Archive that is labeled to be a major pharmaceutical company meeting. Dr. Nathan S. Klein is seen here discussing antipsychotics, though there is no sound, so much of the footage is useless. If you know where this video is, please let me know. It might help us understand what his intentions were and whom he may have been talking to. Since the closing of Willowbrook, New York has told the public their plans to repurpose the campus grounds for the College of Staten Island. The college even has a walk dedicated to the dark history labeled the Willowbrook Mile to tell students and visitors that they recognize the past and won't let it happen again. Except this isn't true. None of it is. They tore down Willowbrook. There is a big empty lot where its GPS coordinates are, conveniently in the shape of the institution. Some YouTubers have even investigated some of the abandoned parts of Willowbrook, which are actually Seaview Hospital, another terrible hospital run by the state of New York that requires a whole video all on its own. Which leads us to the end of this first part, of which only scratches the surface of a seemingly endless series dedicated to unfolding the true history behind America's asylums and state-run institutions. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you guys don't miss when part 2 is released, revealing the connections between Seaview Hospital, Halloran, Willowbrook, and Bellevue. And if you guys liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and comment down below. Until next time.